wasn't dead. I just couldn't move. I couldn't open my eyes. I couldn't speak. But I could hear. Every voice. Every footstep. Every whispered conversation that people thought I'd never remember. For 3 days, everyone prayed I'd wake up. On the 4th day, my sister started asking how long they had to wait before they could legally declare me dead. That's when I stopped praying to wake up and started listening. The last thing I remembered was rain. Heavy rain. The kind that turns highway lines into blurred streaks of white. I had just finished a 12-hour shift at St. Mary's Hospital. Being an ICU nurse teaches you something most people never learn. Life doesn't usually end with drama. It ends quietly. One heartbeat disappears. One monitor changes its rhythm. One family starts crying. Then the room becomes silent. I never imagined I'd become the patient instead. The police told me later that a delivery truck hydroplaned across the center line. He never even touched the brakes. My car rolled twice. The driver's side took most of the impact. I survived. Barely. Multiple fractures. Collapsed lung. Head trauma. The doctors called it a miracle. They also called it a coma. The strange thing about a coma, at least mine, was that darkness wasn't empty. It wasn't sleep. It was like being trapped behind a locked door. You could hear the world. You just couldn't reach it. The first voices were familiar. Doctors. Nurses. Machines. Medication schedules. Blood pressure. Family updates. Normal things. Then I heard Emily. My older sister. Emily always sounded calm. People trusted her immediately. Neighbors loved her. Coworkers adored her. She remembered birthdays. Brought homemade cookies to church. Volunteered every Thanksgiving. Kindness had a face. Probably looked like Emily. That's why nobody noticed what I noticed years ago. Emily never helped unless helping benefited Emily. She didn't manipulate people with lies. She manipulated them with favors. Big difference. The first time she visited my room, she cried. Or at least, it sounded like crying. She held my hand. Told me she loved me. Said Dad hadn't left my bedside. She even told me my dog was being taken care of. Everything a loving sister should say. If I could have smiled, probably would have. Then she thought everyone had left the room. Her voice changed. Not louder. Colder. She whispered, "I wish you'd picked a different day to drive home." Silence. Then footsteps. Door closing. I spent the next 2 hours wondering if I'd imagined it. The next morning, Dad came in. He sounded exhausted. His chair scraped against the floor. He sat beside me for nearly an hour. He didn't talk much. That wasn't unusual. Dad believed silence solved problems words couldn't. Eventually he squeezed my hand and said something that still breaks my heart. "Cora, you've always carried more than your share." Another pause. "I'm sorry." Then he stood up and quietly left. I wanted to tell him he had nothing to apologize for. I wanted to tell him I was still there. I couldn't move a single finger. That afternoon, I heard voices again. More than 2 this time. Emily, Dad, and someone I didn't recognize. A man. Professional. Measured. Calm. Emily introduced him. "Mr. Green is here. Samuel Green. Our family's attorney." Why was our lawyer in my hospital room? My heart started racing. Not because I was scared. Because something didn't make sense. Healthy families don't bring attorneys into ICU rooms. Not unless somebody expects paperwork. I listened carefully. Papers moved across a table. A chair slid backward. Then Mr. Green spoke. His voice was gentle. "Robert, I don't think this conversation should happen yet." Dad didn't answer. Emily did. Quietly. Confidently. Almost impatiently. "We have to prepare." Silence. Then the sentence that changed everything. She said, "If Cora doesn't wake up, we can't keep delaying this." Nobody answered. Then she asked one more question. Question so cold. I still hear it in my dreams. How soon can someone be legally declared deceased if recovery becomes impossible? Until that moment, I thought I was fighting to survive. Now I realize I was fighting against time, because my sister wasn't waiting for me to wake up. She was waiting for someone else to give up. And over the next 48 hours, I discovered something even worse. Emily wasn't the only person hiding a secret. The lawyer was hiding one too. At least, that's what I believed. Because after Emily asked her question, Mr. Green didn't answer right away. Paper stopped moving. The room went completely silent. Then he spoke. Quiet, careful, almost like he was choosing every word. Cora is still alive. Another pause. And until that changes, I won't discuss inheritance. Inheritance. There it was. The word nobody had been willing to say. Emily sighed. Not loudly, just enough for me to hear it. Then she said, I'm trying to be realistic. Mr. Green answered immediately. No. Another pause. You're trying to be early. The room went quiet again. That was the first moment I realized. The lawyer wasn't helping Emily. He was slowing her down. The conversation ended a minute later. Chairs moved. The door opened. Dad stayed behind. I heard him sit down beside my bed. For a long time, he didn't say anything. Then, almost in a whisper, he said, I know you're still here. Every machine around me kept humming, but inside my head, everything stopped. Did he know? Could he actually tell? Or was he just hoping? I wanted to squeeze his hand, blink, move, anything. Nothing happened. Dad let out a tired breath, then quietly said, Don't quit on me. That night, I met Megan. At least, that's what her name tag said. Megan Brooks. Night shift ICU nurse. Unlike everyone else, Megan talked to me like I could hear her. She explained every medication, every test, every floor adjustment. Not because she had to, because she believed patients deserve dignity. Before leaving my room, she smiled, then said, I don't know if you can hear me, but if you can, keep fighting. For the first time since the accident, I didn't feel completely alone. The next morning, Emily arrived carrying flowers, fresh lilies. Dad hated lilies. They reminded him of funerals. Emily knew that. She placed them beside my bed anyway. Dad noticed. His chair scraped across the floor. Take those out. Emily looked surprised. They're beautiful. Dad's voice stayed calm. They don't belong here. Without another word, Emily picked them up, walked into the hallway. The door didn't fully close. She thought nobody could hear. She was wrong. Her phone rang. She answered immediately. Yes. Small pause. No. Another pause. Nothing yet. Silence. Then she lowered her voice. So stop asking. A longer pause. I said I'll handle it. Click. Call ended. Handle what? Who was calling her? Why did she sound nervous? Questions kept piling up. Answers never came. Later that afternoon, Megan returned. She checked my monitors, adjusted one of the machines, then suddenly stopped. I heard paper rustling. She picked something up from the floor. Very quietly, she said. That's strange. Footsteps. Drawer opening. Paper unfolding. Then, silence. Almost 30 seconds of silence. Finally, she whispered, Why would this be here? I had no idea what she'd found, but whatever it was, she didn't put it back. And said, I heard it slide into a folder. That evening, Mr. Green came back. This time, alone. No Emily. No Dad. Just him. He closed the door, pulled a chair close to my bed, and spoke softly, not to the room, to me. Cora. I don't know if you can hear me. Pause. But if you can, I need you to keep listening. My heart felt like it was pounding through my chest. He continued. Your father trusted you with something. Long pause. I don't think your sister ever found it. Found what? What was he talking about? Then he said the sentence that changed everything. There is a second will. I couldn't breathe. Not because of the machines. Because suddenly, nothing made sense anymore. A second will? Dad never mentioned a second will. Neither had Mr. Green. So why now? Why was he telling me this, while everyone believed I couldn't hear? And more importantly, what was inside that document that made Emily so desperate to move first? Over the next 24 hours, I learned two terrifying things. First, Emily wasn't searching for money. She was searching for one missing envelope. And second, she had already started looking for it. Inside my own house. The moment I heard those words, I realized something that terrified me more than the accident itself. If Emily found that envelope before I woke up, I might lose everything. Not because she deserved it, because nobody would know it ever existed. The next morning started differently. The room felt busy. Nurses changed shifts. Doctors reviewed charts. Machines beeped in their familiar rhythm. Then I heard Dad's voice. Quiet. Tired. He wasn't alone. Emily was with him. Neither of them spoke for nearly a minute. Finally, Dad broke the silence. Cora always kept things organized. Emily answered immediately. I know. Another pause. I've already started cleaning her house. Cleaning. That word hit me harder than it should have. Cleaning meant going through my things. Drawers. Closets. Files. Everything. Dad sounded confused. I didn't ask you to do that. Emily replied with the same calm voice she always used. I thought it would help. Help. She always called it helping. Dad sighed. If Cora wakes up, she's going to want everything exactly where she left it. Emily didn't answer. Instead, she changed the subject. I found some financial papers. Dad asked, where? My desk. She corrected herself almost instantly. I mean, Cora's desk. It was only one word. But I caught it. She wasn't thinking about my house anymore. She was already thinking about it as hers. After they left, Megan came in. She checked my phone, adjusted the monitor, then quietly locked the room door. That had never happened before. She pulled up a chair, sat beside my bed, and whispered, I know this sounds crazy, but I think you can hear me. Every instinct inside me screamed, yes, please, keep talking. She continued, I've been an ICU nurse for 12 years. I've seen this before. Patients remember more than people think. She leaned a little closer. So I'm going to tell you something. Pause. Your sister searched this room yesterday. My heartbeat jumped. Megan kept talking. She said she was looking for your phone charger. Another pause. She wasn't. I heard paper unfold. Megan lowered her voice even more. I found this under your mattress. Under my mattress? There shouldn't have been anything there. She unfolded the paper. It looks like a photocopy. Small pause. Half of a handwritten note. She read the words aloud. Slowly. Only Samuel knows where the original is. Silence. Then, never tell Emily until. She stopped reading. The sentence ended there. The bottom half had been torn away. My mind raced. Dad. The lawyer. A second will. A hidden envelope. And now, a note warning someone not to tell Emily. This wasn't coincidence anymore. This was preparation. Someone had expected this day. Years before it happened. That afternoon, Mr. Green returned. This time, he looked worried. Not nervous. Worried. He spoke with Megan in the hallway. Their voices were low. I could only catch pieces. She searched. Medical records. That's not normal. Keep copies. Medical records? Why would Emily want my records? Then I heard footsteps. Fast. Purposeful. Emily. She walked straight into my room. Didn't say hello. Didn't touch my hand. Didn't even look at me. And said, she opened the bedside cabinet. One drawer. Then another. She checked behind the television. Opened the closet. Looked under the visitor's chair. She wasn't visiting. She was searching. Then, she walked over to my bed. So close I could hear her breathing. She leaned down beside my ear. And whispered something that made my blood run cold. I know you hid it. Long pause. I just don't know where. She stood up. Smoothed the blanket. By the time Dad walked back into the room, she was smiling again. The perfect sister. Concerned. Gentle. Kind. Nobody would have believed what she just said. Nobody except me. That evening, Dad stayed after everyone left. He looked exhausted. Older than I'd ever seen him. He sat beside my bed, holding something in his hands. I heard paper. A photograph. He laughed quietly. You were 8. Small pause. You insisted on burying a time capsule. Another pause. You said, some things should stay hidden until people earn them. He chuckled softly. I think you were right. Then he placed the photograph back into his pocket and left. I couldn't stop thinking about those words. A time capsule. Hidden. Earned. Were they connected? Or was Dad simply remembering better days? I had no way of knowing. But something deep inside me told me he wasn't talking about childhood anymore. The next morning, Emily did something no loving sister would ever do. She asked the doctor to leave the room, looked around to make sure she was alone. Then she admitted something. Not to me. To herself. One terrible sentence. And from that moment on, I knew this wasn't about inheritance. It was about covering up something she'd already done. It wasn't about inheritance anymore. It was about something Emily couldn't afford for anyone to discover. Morning came with the sound of rain against the hospital window. Soft. Steady. The kind of rain that makes every hallway feel quieter. Doctors made their rounds. Nurses checked monitors. Visitors came and went. Everything looked normal. Until Emily arrived. She wasn't carrying flowers this time. No coffee. No smile. Just a leather folder tucked under her arm. She barely acknowledged Dad. Instead, she walked straight to the attending physician. Could we have a moment? The doctor hesitated, then nodded. Someone was helping Emily. That thought stayed with me all night. Because Emily wasn't clever enough to find documents she'd never seen. She needed information. Someone had to be feeding it to her. The only question was, who? The next morning the hospital felt different. Not louder. Heavier. I could hear security radios in the hallway. More footsteps than usual. Doors opening. Doors closing. Then, Dad walked in. His breathing sounded uneven. Not from age. From anger. He pulled his chair beside my bed. Sat down heavily. Didn't speak for almost a minute. Finally, he whispered. She broke into your house. Long pause. I can't believe she actually did it. Another chair moved. Mr. Green. He had come with Dad. The lawyer sounded calmer than ever. The police documented everything. Dad sighed. But they found nothing. Mr. Green answered. That's because she knew exactly what she wanted. Silence. Then Dad asked, did she get it? Mr. Green didn't answer immediately. And said, he asked a question. Did Cora ever tell Emily about the workshop? Dad answered instantly. No. What about the storage unit? No. The safety deposit box? No. Another pause. Then Mr. Green quietly said, good. Storage unit? Safety deposit box? Workshop? How many secrets had Dad hidden? And why had he trusted me instead of Emily? Before either man could continue, someone knocked. 2 police officers entered. One introduced himself. Detective Alan Brooks. The other carried a tablet. The detective spoke politely. Mr. Anders, but whoever they belong to. They've been inside that house before. Not a stranger. Someone familiar. Someone comfortable. Someone who knew the layout. After the officers left, Dad spoke quietly. There has to be another person. Mr. Green nodded. I've believed that for weeks. Weeks? He already suspected someone? Mr. Green unlocked his briefcase. Paper slid across the table. Then he said, I didn't want to tell you until I was sure. He paused. Cora's accountant resigned 2 days before the accident. Dad sounded surprised. Michael? Yes. He disappeared. Another pause. And yesterday, Emily transferred $25,000 into an account connected to his consulting firm. Dad slammed his hand on the armrest. Not loudly, just enough for me to hear the frustration. So she paid him. Mr. Green answered. I believe she paid him to find something. But I don't think he found it. That was when another memory surfaced. Not completely. Just fragments. Standing in Dad's workshop. Dad placing a thick yellow envelope into an old steel toolbox. Then looking at me. Dead serious. If anyone ever asks about this, tell them it doesn't exist. The memory vanished as quickly as it came. But one thing stayed. The toolbox. Not a safe. Not a vault. A rusty old toolbox. The last place anyone would think to look. Late that evening, Megan returned. She closed the blinds, checked the hallway, then pulled the small brass key from her pocket. I've been trying to figure out what this opens. She smiled nervously. I think I have an idea. She unfolded a small piece of paper. Hospital storage records. Across the top, one number was circled. Locker 317. She looked back at me. If this key belongs there, whatever's inside has been sitting in this hospital the entire time. My heart pounded. The hospital? Not the house. Not the bank. Had Dad hidden something here? Just then, the door opened. Emily walked in. She froze. Her eyes locked onto the brass key in Megan's hand. For the first time since the accident, Emily's calm mask disappeared. Her face turned completely white. She whispered one word. Someone would try to steal that key. Inside the hospital. That was the moment I realized. This story was never about an inheritance. It was about a secret my father had spent 20 years protecting. Emily wasn't afraid of the key. She was afraid of what it could prove. The room fell silent. Nobody moved. Megan was still holding the tiny brass key between her fingers. Emily stared at it like she'd just seen a ghost. Then, almost instantly, her expression changed. The panic disappeared. The warm smile came back. It happened so fast. Most people would have missed it. I didn't. Emily laughed softly. I've been looking for that. Megan frowned. You have. Emily nodded. Dad gave Cora a small keepsake years ago. She smiled. I figured this must be it. Dad didn't say a word. He just watched her. Really watched her. The way you watch someone after they've already lied once too many. Megan looked at the key. Then at Emily. I'm sorry. I'll need to document anything found in the patient's room. Emily's smile faded. It belongs to my family. Megan answered politely. And until Miss Anders can tell us that herself, it stays with hospital property. Emily didn't argue. She simply nodded. Too easily. That worried me. Emily never stopped after the first no. She simply looked for another door. That evening, Megan finished her shift. Before leaving, she leaned close to my bed, almost whispering, I don't trust your sister. Small pause. So I didn't leave the key at the nurse's station. Another pause. I locked it somewhere else. Good. For the first time since the accident, Emily was one step behind. At 8:30 that night, the hallway grew quiet. Night shift. Lights dimmed. Monitors beeped steadily. Then, I heard footsteps. Slow. Careful. Not a nurse. No, it's time. Those two words changed everything. For nearly a week, everyone had been reacting. Now, Dad was making the first move. 20 minutes later, I heard my bed begin to roll. The nurses weren't taking me for a scan. They were moving me. Megan walked beside the bed. Dad followed quietly. Mr. Green carried the leather briefcase. Nobody explained where we were going. Nobody had to. I already knew. Locker 317. The elevator doors opened. The basement smelled different. Concrete. Dust. Old paint. Nothing like the ICU upstairs. The wheels echoed through the hallway until they stopped. A heavy metal door opened. Someone unlocked it. Storage. Megan whispered. Locker 317. Metal scraped against metal. The tiny brass key slid into the lock. For one terrifying second, nothing happened. Then, click. The lock released. Nobody rushed forward. Dad stood perfectly still. As if opening that locker meant opening 10 years of memories. Finally, Mr. Green pulled the small gray door open. Inside, there wasn't a stack of cash. No jewelry. No deeds. Just one weathered canvas bag. Dad recognized it immediately. His voice cracked. Cora's mother's. Silence filled the room. Dad reached into the bag with shaking hands. He removed 3 things. A sealed yellow envelope, a black leather journal, and a small wooden box. Nothing more. Nothing less. Emily had nearly destroyed our family for something that fit inside a backpack. Mr. Green looked at the envelope. The wax seal was untouched. Dad nodded. Open it. The lawyer carefully broke the seal. Inside, lay a handwritten document. Every page signed. Every page notarized. The second will. Mr. Green began reading. I, Robert Anders, being of sound mind. His voice echoed through the room. The will was simple. Everything was divided fairly. No surprises. No secret fortune. No hidden millions. Dad had always intended to take care of both daughters. Then Mr. Green reached the final page. His voice slowed. There is one additional instruction. Everyone looked up. Dad closed his eyes, like he already knew what came next. Mr. Green continued. If this document is ever opened because one of my children attempts to gain control through deception, that child forfeits every discretionary inheritance described above. The room fell silent. He read the next sentence. My estate is not a reward for blood. It is a reward for character. Even lying unconscious, I felt tears forming behind my closed eyes. Dad hadn't written that because he expected betrayal. He wrote it because he hoped he would never need it. Mr. Green turned one final page. There is also a personal letter. He looked at Dad. Would you like me to read it? Dad shook his head. No. Long pause. Read it to Cora. The lawyer unfolded the letter. The paper sounded older than everything else. His voice became softer. Cora, if you're hearing this, then something happened that I prayed never would. He paused, then continued. You've spent your whole life believing I trusted you because you were stronger. That isn't true. I trusted you because when nobody was watching, you still did the right thing. I wanted to cry. I wanted to tell him I'd heard every word. Instead, I lay perfectly still, listening. Then the lawyer read the sentence that explained everything. The envelope was never the real test. Pause. The test was whether greed would reveal itself. And greed is always impatient. Suddenly, the storage room door slammed open. Everyone turned. Heavy footsteps echoed across the concrete floor. Emily. She stood frozen in the doorway, breathing hard. Her eyes immediately found the opened envelope. Then the journal. Then the wooden box. She was too late. For the first time, she didn't pretend. No smile. No tears. No performance. She whispered one sentence, barely loud enough for anyone to hear. I knew he'd choose her. Dad slowly turned toward her. His face wasn't angry. It was disappointed. That was somehow worse. Emily thought losing the inheritance was the worst thing that could happen. She was wrong. Because Mr. Green hadn't opened the journal yet. And inside that journal was one handwritten entry, dated 3 months before my accident. One entry that proved Emily hadn't simply planned to steal my future. She had been lying to our father for years. And once he read those pages aloud, there would be no way back. Emily thought losing the inheritance was the worst thing that could happen. She had no idea. The money was already the smallest problem. Nobody spoke. The storage room felt impossibly quiet. Emily stood frozen in the doorway. Dad looked at her. Not with anger. With heartbreak. Mr. Green slowly closed the will. Then reached for the black leather journal. Emily immediately stepped forward. No. Her voice cracked. You don't need to read that. Mr. Green didn't answer. He simply opened the first page. The journal wasn't a diary. It was Dad's record book. Dates. Meetings. Conversations. Important decisions. He'd been keeping it for nearly 15 years. Every entry was handwritten. Every page dated. Every page signed. Mr. Green flipped carefully through the pages until he reached a red bookmark. He looked at the date, then quietly read it aloud. March 14th. 3 months before Cora's accident. Emily lowered her head. She already knew which page it was. Mr. Green began reading. Emily asked me for another loan today. She said it was temporary. I asked for bank statements. She refused. The room remained silent. He continued. I later learned she had already borrowed against her own home. Credit cards were maxed out. Business investment failed. She owes more money than she admits. Dad never interrupted. He didn't need to. The journal spoke for him. Mr. Green turned another page. Emily asked if I planned to divide everything equally. When I said yes, she asked if Cora would consider buying her out. Long pause. That was the first day I worried she no longer saw her sister as family. She saw her as an obstacle. Emily's eyes filled with tears. Finally, she spoke. I was desperate. Nobody answered. She continued. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. Dad looked at her quietly, then asked the simplest question he'd asked all week. So why didn't you tell me? Emily looked away. I was ashamed. Dad nodded slowly. I would have helped. She whispered. I know. Another pause. But I thought, if Cora inherited first, I'd lose everything. Mr. Green turned one final page. The last entry, written 6 days before the accident. He read slowly. I have decided to prepare a second will. Not because I trust one daughter more than the other. Because one daughter has begun making decisions based on fear. Fear always becomes greed. And greed eventually destroys families. Nobody moved. The words hung in the room. Heavy. Final. Emily covered her face. She wasn't crying because she'd lost money. She was crying because someone had understood her. Long before she understood herself. Dad walked toward her. Slowly. He stopped only a few feet away. I never cared about the money. His voice remained calm. I cared about you. Emily lowered her hands. He continued. You thought I was choosing between daughters. Small pause. I was trying to save one. For the first time, Emily completely stopped defending herself. No excuses. No explanations. Just silence. The kind of silence that only comes after the truth finally wins. At that exact moment, something unexpected happened. A monitor behind me began beeping faster. Much faster. Megan looked toward my bed, then down at my hand. She gasped. Dad. I think she moved. The room froze. Nobody breathed. Megan leaned closer. Cora. If you can hear me, squeeze my hand. I tried. Every muscle in my body screamed. Nothing. Then, my little finger twitched. Barely. Almost invisible. But it moved. Megan looked at the monitor. Then back at Dad. Tears filled her eyes. She's coming back. Dad closed his eyes. The first smile I'd heard in his voice all week appeared. Small. Relieved. Real. Emily looked toward me. For the first time since the accident, she wasn't looking at an inheritance. She was looking at her sister. And for the first time, she understood exactly what she'd almost lost. 3 weeks later, I finally opened my eyes. Everyone expected me to ask about the accident. Instead, I asked one question. A question that made Emily turn completely pale. Because I remembered every single word she'd whispered beside my hospital bed. And I wasn't the only one who knew. The hospital had recorded something that none of us expected. The final chapter brings everything full circle. 3 weeks later, I finally opened my eyes. The first thing I saw was sunlight. Soft morning light spilling across the hospital window. Everything looked blurry. My throat burned. Every breath felt heavy. Then I heard someone quietly crying. Dad. He was sitting exactly where he'd been every single day. The same chair. The same worn jacket. The same coffee cup sitting beside him. When he realized I was looking at him, he froze. For a second, he couldn't move. Then he smiled. Not the kind of smile people practice for photographs. The kind that only appears after you've spent weeks preparing yourself for the worst. He reached for my hand and whispered, Welcome back. The doctors filled the room. Questions. Flashlights. Blood pressure. Memory tests. I answered what I could. Sometimes with words. Sometimes just a nod. Everything felt slow. Like my mind was waking up one piece at a time. Finally, the room became quiet again. Only Dad remained. He looked at me carefully, almost afraid to ask. Cora. Do you remember the accident? I nodded. A little. Then I swallowed. My voice barely worked. I remember. Another breath. The hospital. Dad smiled. That's normal. I looked at him. No. Long pause. I remember. Emily. Dad's smile disappeared. I could see the question in his eyes. So I answered it before he had to ask. I heard everything. Silence. I heard every visit. Another pause. Every conversation. Then one more. I heard what she whispered. Dad slowly looked toward the floor. He didn't seem surprised, only sad. The next afternoon, Emily came to see me. She stood in the doorway, didn't come closer, didn't pretend everything was normal. She simply stood there, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Finally, she spoke. I don't expect you to forgive me. I didn't answer. She continued. I convinced myself that I deserved more. Her voice broke, and after a while, I stopped caring what it cost. For the first time, there were no excuses, no blaming, no pretending she was helping, just the truth. I asked one question, quietly. Did you ever want me to die? Emily's eyes filled with tears. She answered immediately. No. Long pause. I wanted the fear to stop. Another pause. I just forgot that you were the one paying for it. She turned to leave. I'll sign whatever the lawyer puts in front of me. I don't want anything. Then she walked away. That was the last time I saw her for almost a year. Recovery took months. Learning to walk again wasn't the hardest part. Learning to trust people again was. Dad visited almost every day. Sometimes we'd talk. Sometimes we'd just sit together. Neither of us needed many words anymore. One afternoon, he handed me the black journal. You should keep it. I turned the pages slowly. Every entry reminded me of something. Not business. Not money. Choices. Dad hadn't written about buildings. He'd written about people. Who kept promises. Who disappeared when things became difficult. Who stayed, even when nobody was watching. Near the back, I found one final page. It hadn't been read in the storage room. The handwriting was shakier. Newer. Simply said, if you're reading this, then I was right about one thing. Character is never revealed during success. It's revealed when someone believes nobody is watching. Money doesn't change people. It introduces them. There was nothing else. No signature. He didn't need one. I already knew whose words they were. Dad passed away peacefully 8 months later. There wasn't another argument. Another court hearing. Another fight over property. The second will was honored exactly as he intended. Emily kept her promise. She signed every document. She never challenged a single decision. Not because she had to, because she finally understood. She'd spent years chasing something Dad was never trying to leave behind. His greatest inheritance wasn't the company. It wasn't the house. It wasn't the money. It was his name. And once trust is gone, no lawyer, no contract, and no amount of money can ever write it back. People ask me sometimes if I think justice was served. I always give the same answer. Justice didn't happen the day the will was opened. It happened the moment my father realized that character matters more than inheritance, and quietly made sure the right person would carry both. Because the strongest revenge isn't watching someone lose everything. It's watching the truth make sure they never deserved it in the first place. If there's one lesson I carried out of that hospital, never measure your family by what they say when you're standing beside them. Measure them by what they think you'll never hear.